Hello, class. As you know, we're going to be talking about employee engagement and how it is related to internal communications. Pretty much, my job is to try to convince you that the whole point of internal communications is employee engagement. If you, by the end of the presentation, if you believe that, means I did my job. I would like to start with an image which I found while searching. It was one of the images that I found on LinkedIn, which I really liked, by Richard Branson. Because I follow him, and he had this image of his team, and with his quote, "The way you treat your employees is the way they will treat your customers." So, and it shows you that employee engagement is something that is transferable. They do not just retain it, but however they would actually, it gets showed or it gets transferred to external stakeholders, may it be customers, suppliers, the media, and that is why it's really, really important to even emphasize on employee engagement. By research, simply, it is important because employee engagement or high employee engagement means high organizational performance. And some people may debate that this one causes the other, or, but they usually go hand in hand. But what is an engaged employee? How do you engage an employee? Well, or how would that employee show their engagement? Pretty much, they become more productive, they innovate new solutions, well-being, and the turnover is low, so there's not a lot of people wanting to leave the organization. And of course, performance and organizational profitability, which comes with it. And now, with regards to employee engagement, it is defined by Gross as that the emotional connection that the employee has with his employer. And this entails so many things, and even the outlook that this employee has towards the future as being the member of the team. What's in it for him or her. So what makes an employee engaged? Pretty much encouragement by their superiors, work-life balance. Pretty much, they're not staying. They get to go home when they need to, and work is work, life is life. So they can manage time with their family members and with their tasks. And I highlighted this part: believe in the mission and vision of the organization. As you remember, in our previous class, we talked about how it is really important, and pretty much engagement is when they've actually internalized the mission and vision of the organization. Praise and recognition. If they are top performers, do they get awarded, recognized as either the employee of the month, or they'd get like a thank you certificate of some sort. And of course, the sense of concern for well-being. A lot of us are, a lot of employees there in the oil and gas industry, but some of them that are on the field, are we telling them to always put on their hard hat or helmet in case something might happen or something might fall on them? And if they're driving, are they always, having their seatbelts if it's part of their job? And pretty much so many other things. What, of course, their job expectations and resource sufficiency. Pretty much, if they needed anything, the information is there. They don't need to worry about it. And opportunities to use skills. For example, if someone is really good in terms of graphic design, but he's hired as an engineer, and there is an opening, and he or she sees himself more to apply. Finding out about the opportunity or the job opening is just a simple example of how this driver could be in play. Pretty much employee engagement wasn't always the way it is today, or wasn't always as it understood today. Pretty much employee engagement was, as per Mumford mentioned, it was considered employee behavior or employee satisfaction or job satisfaction. But pretty much the way you can see that when you say employee engagement, the responsibility is on the employer themselves. So, as per employee behavior, which is pretty much really determines the employee at their current situation with their current employer, but not pretty much there is a responsibility that falls into the employer, and that's why we're looking at it in terms of internal communications. Now, employee engagement, pretty much from its early understanding in the 1940s to what it is today, it went through a lot of changes. Right now we do not negate. It's not like there's a total shift. We went from entertaining, informing, to persuading, and then to create pretty much an open communications, and really look into how it actually affects the organization. Just to see if really engaged employees do create a better impact. Now, looking into internal communications role in employee engagement. Of course, us as communicators, we need to make sure that we've explained the business objectives to the employees, ensure that they've received enough information for them to do their jobs. It can be as simple as a manual, or as a guideline, or at least their manager tells them what it is that they need to know. Even face-to-face communications is considered part of internal communications. It doesn't have to be an email or a certain channel or a certain vehicle to be considered under employee internal communications. Even interpersonal is considered under the umbrella of IC. And of course, to make sure that they understand their jobs and how it is related to the organization objectives, keep reminding them that they're doing a good job, they're fighting a good fight. It really makes a difference. And of course, if they are relying on internal sources for information about their job, for example, we've heard case studies of two companies merging, or in a situation like that, and if they found out that some jobs are going to be made redundant from external sources, that does discount some of their employee engagement. They feel less engaged. Why haven't I known about it from internally? Why hasn't my manager told me about it, or my direct report told me about it? And of course, awareness on who is responsible for the internal communications in their organization. The reason why this is important, because you have to maintain a two-way communications channel. What must we consider in our internal communications for an effective, there was a typo, sorry, an effective employee engagement? There's pretty much, as a communications channel, there are so many factors, and when it comes to employee engagement, it is no exception. We have to consider the culture, but in this case, we'll consider job roles and seniority and where they stand in the organization, gender, age, or pretty much which generation, and what's their literacy when it comes to certain channel vehicles. I mean, do they prefer WhatsApp, or do they require a circular? How is it that they want to go on about it? The timing of the message, language or languages, and the sensitivity of the topic to the welfare of the individual employee. If there's something that really affects their job, they don't want to hear about it in the company's email. They'd rather, they prefer their manager letting them know firsthand before it goes public, at least internally at the organization. Of course, now let's talk about the cost of the disengagement. This is from another source. It's called The Cost of Unengaged Employees and How to Inspire Change, from an author called Huye Chang, which is one of the two readings I had to do to cover in this presentation. pretty much it looks into two types of disengagement. And probably when I mention this, you might have a person in mind. It's like, oh, that person is an active or a just not engaged person. And you will find you must have come up to people in your life that actually fall with a not engaged, just minor, just simply not engaged. And there's the actively disengaged. So the actively disengaged, you'll find out that they're a bit more destructive. As Gallup mentioned in 2013, not engaged employees are essentially checked out. They're sleepwalking through their workday, putting time but not energy or passion into their work. However, the actively disengaged employees are not just unhappy at work, they are busy acting out their unhappiness. Every day, these workers determine what their engaged coworkers undermine what their engaged coworkers accomplish. For example, if someone's doing a good job, they say, they probably knows the manager or something. So pretty much that's the tone of voice of an actively disengaged employee. And now, how can we associate cost? We know that there's a positive outcome in terms of performance and profitability. But how can you associate cost with disengaged employees? This is from a book, The New Rules of Employee Engagement, where it's taken from the States, where 30% of American employees are fully engaged at work. So 30%. This means that there are other 70% that are not engaged in their work. Now let's talk about the damage of that 70%. They're fully engaged at work, leading to an annual cost of $450 billion to $550 billion spent on absenteeism. People, just prefer not to come to work on certain days. Workplace accidents, because they take things for granted, or they haven't the safety precautions were not communicated to them, or they feel like they're in a place where they don't matter. Employee health care, pretty much it's obvious. If you don't like the work that you're in, psychological well-being or psychosomatic connection, you just end up being sick. Pretty much we'll all find reasons not to be in the place that we don't like to be. So this all comes into play. Good news is that you can calculate disengagement. There is a formula online where you could actually take it and apply it, and just go to the human resource and say, hey, let's see how our employee disengagement costs us. So that's an option that's always available. And pretty much, I'm sorry, I just forgot a thank you. Forgot to add that slide. So anyways, thank you for listening. I tried to put it in a video while including my ever so dramatic facial expressions, just to get the idea across, because I'm really passionate about employee engagement, and I sure hope it shows. Thank you again.